Okay, so we are starting on a 6-week journey based on the book Dark Matters, Discovering Wholeness in the Shadows by Reverend Lori Boyd. And I want to tell you the reason that I feel excited about this book. You know, our mission is to be authentically all that we came here to be. And a lot of times in New Thought thinking, we focus so much on the light, and we don't really talk about the quote-unquote dark aspects. And so what I have found in my years in ministry is that a lot of people come to me and they feel so guilty because, you know, they haven't made a decision that they feel proud of, or they've been judgmental, or they've gotten angry over a situation, or experienced some jealousy. Anybody ever do any of those things? Anybody not ever do any of those things? So I'm just going to ask you to rise right now because we want to interview you. And I think it's important, and this is what this book offers us, is the opportunity to embrace all the aspects of ourselves without making any aspect of ourselves bad or wrong, but to recognize it really is this opportunity that we have to live both the human life and the divine life. Now, I'm going to start in the beginning in Genesis 1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw the light, and it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness, and God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. Well, I thought it was interesting that in the very first paragraph of Genesis, he didn't call the dark good. He just called the light good. So, like, we're kind of set up already with, this. However, it gets redeemed in the 14th verse. And God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years, and let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth." And it was so. And God made 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. And God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was all good. So, yay! Now we know that it was intended that both the dark and the light would be good. And the thing is that, we need the darkness. I mean, the darkness is as vital to our life experience as the light is. I look at on a piano, and I remember one time having Joe just play all the white keys and then just play all the dark keys, and it was still beautiful. But when the fullness of the music comes is when you're able to play both the dark and the light keys. And, we have examples of this over and over and over again. And yet in our humanness, we want to step away from the light. I was hoping to show a video. How many of you have seen the videos of the children and their shadows on Facebook? Anybody seen them? Well, they're hilarious because here's these little kids, and they're just young. They're just like 2, 3 years old. They don't really totally understand it yet. They're outside and they're walking, and all of a sudden they see their shadow, and then they move and they see their shadow, and they move, and then it's like, oh, and they start crying because they can't get away from their shadow. And their parent is trying to tell them it's okay, but everywhere they go, their shadow is right there with them. And that's with us, is that we're afraid of our shadow. We're afraid to talk about our shadow. Oh my goodness. And so it's so important for us to know that we're good enough just as we are. Just turn to somebody and say, "You're good enough just as you are." Tell somebody else that. You're good enough just as you are. Now I want you to say, "I'm good enough just as I am." Man, I'll tell you what, you guys killed it. Our first service, boy, I had to coach him a little bit on that. They weren't wanting to own that. So, okay, so we're talking about the interplay of light and dark. And Carl Jung was actually the one who coined the shadow and the persona. And he said the persona of this of us is the part that we are willing to show. It's the light. It's the part that we like, that we feel is acceptable. It's our best foot forward. How many of us like to show our persona? Yeah. Okay, the shadow is that part of ourself which is hidden from the world, and oftentimes it's that part of us that's even hidden from ourselves. Reverend Laurie in her book says that, our shadows are built on our whole life experience, and that it's often made up of, the pain of the experiences, things that we've been told, ways that we've been programmed as we've been growing up, but that our psyche likes to be whole just like our body likes to be whole. And when our psyche isn't whole, then and it's wounded, then we're going to start to experience that, in our life experience. We're going to see that showing up. She goes on to say that our culture teaches us to fear the dark. In fact, we've made up all kinds of things, about the dark, and we've made up things in order to combat the dark, and we've developed rituals and religions and psychologies and pills to distract us from the dark, and it's almost as if we've focused so much on the light that we think if we focus on the light, then there will be no darkness. Has that worked for anybody? It hasn't worked for me either. That's so interesting. But she said if we learn to step through the fear, that there's such richness, even through the process of stepping into it, and there's such richness on the other side of that. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And I love, because she said that what we ultimately learn is that we're not seeking light, you guys. We're seeking wholeness. We're seeking wholeness, and we're seeking to embrace our whole being, every aspect of our being. And the great news is because I know, I can only speak for myself, but I know there are things that sometimes I show up in a way, and I will literally say, this is not the person that I want to be. And but the great news is that we always, through that awareness, have opportunities to expand and to grow, and to not go back to those old habits, right? Yeah. Okay. So I also was given to read the book The Dark Side of the Light Chasers by Debbie Ford. Great information. And she says that the dark doesn't mean just something negative. It means something that is out of the light of our awareness. Out of the light of our awareness. I love that. When you think about the shadow, if you go into the shade, you can't see the shadow. But when we come out to the light, then we can see it, and we just don't look at it. Now, I'm gonna say this. We're good at looking at everybody else's shadows, aren't we? Oh, we see everybody else's shadows, yeah. But we aren't so much. And the thing about this, the beauty of this journey for me, is that as we learn to embrace our own shadows, we're not going to be so judgmental. It's going to free so much of that up in us because we're not protecting something here. So it's going to be an amazing journey. Okay, so she shares that she has, and I have to believe probably most of us have, these hidden places in us where we feel like we're not enough. We're not, something's wrong with me. I'm not okay. I'm not worthy. I'm not lovable. I'm not deserving. How about this line? If you only knew what really went on in my mind, then you'd think differently of me. And I love how Carl Jung says that the shadow is the person you would rather not be, right? It's the person you would rather not be. And the shadow shows up as things like, it has many faces. So there's greed and fear, anger, vindictiveness, selfishness, manipulative, lazy, controlling, hostile, ugly, undeserving, cheap, weak, critical, judgmental, and the list does go on and on. And so here's something that I really related to with her. She said that in her life, her dream was to be perfect in order to be loved. And that idea of perfection came from, of course, her parents. And what she heard growing up is what to not be, so what to not do. So don't be mean, don't be angry, don't be manipulative, don't be selfish, don't be greedy, don't talk back, don't ask. And how many of us were raised with a lot of that going on? Don't do this. And so she began to believe that she was bad because sometimes she was mean. Sometimes she was judgmental. And she said sometimes, by golly, she wanted to eat all the cookies and she didn't want to share, you know. And I really could relate to that you can see how we begin to build this shadow part of ourselves because we want to be loved and accepted. And so we learn these rules on what that means. And so when we are just normal in our life, we create this kind of other part of us that's like, oh, that's that selfish part, that's that greedy part, that's that untruthful part, or whatever it is. But she says that our shadow self is there to really give us our entire life back. It's there to give us our entire life back. Now, I also love this. Neil Donald Walsh, the author of Conversations with God books, they're such good books, said that he attended a seminar that was life-changing for him. And in this seminar, the facilitator said, all of your so-called faults, all the things which you don't like about yourself, are your greatest assets. I want that to sink in a minute. All of your so-called faults, all the things that you don't like about yourself, are your greatest assets. They're simply over-amplified. And so the volume's just been turned up a little bit too much, so we have the opportunity to turn the volume down. And then we're going to start seeing our weaknesses as our strengths and our negatives as our positives, and we're going to see that these become tools for us. So, in other words, have you ever been around somebody that you really like, but they have this over-the-top energy all the time, and it kind of wears you out, but you really enjoy their positive presence? And so in that case, it's just, it would be appropriate to be aware and just, turn that down a little bit. And you still have the positive aspect. And that's one of the things I loved about in my reading, that there's always this polar opposite. And we want to make that polar opposite bad, but we can't have the light without the dark. We can't have this great joy without a depth of sadness. We can't have courage without the fear. And so these polar opposites are not bad things. And this is so much part of this journey is accepting that and embracing that these are not bad things at all. Cheryl Richardson says that you must go into the dark in order to bring out your light, because when we suppress any feeling, so if we suppress greed, then we're also suppressing generosity. And when we suppress fear, we're suppressing courage. So I want to share with you now, in her book, in Lori's book, she actually shares what I'm going to share with you. We both had the same instructor at some point when I was going through my licensed teacher stuff at Unity Village, and his name's Robert Brummett, and he took us through a really awesome relaxation and visualization meditation. And of course, we wrote everything down as we went. So that's why I'm going to share it with you, because this was probably 2005, 2006, somewhere in there. And so he, got us all relaxed. And then we were to use our imagination. We were going through the woods on a beautiful, clear, kind of early summer day. And, the trees were green and the sky was blue with a few clouds in the sky. The sun was shining. And then you could smell that fresh air where the spring is just mingling with the summertime. And ahead of us was a hill, and there was a path on this hill, and we were to walk up this path to a house on top of the hill. Now, he doesn't tell us what any of this looks like at this point. So the house that I saw, which really is not unusual for me, was a house, nice little house, kind of with a white picket fence, and had everything was perfectly in order. And not that that's how my house is, but that's what I would visualize. That's what I visualize my house being like. But anyway, so appropriate amount of bushes and flowers and things like that. And when we knocked on the door, we were just supposed to be open to whatever presented itself. Well, when I opened the door, fear is what answered. But interestingly enough, I would have thought that fear, because it would have been like this big, ugly, monstrous, gnarly kind of thing. And yet fear looked like a stick of gum. So not like the little Trident gum bite, the gum, like we used to get, the longer sticks of gum with legs and arms and a head. And it was kind of like a Gumby kind of thing, real kind of flowing and white with a little bit of gray at the bottom. It was quite interesting to see that. So then we were prompted to ask questions. And so the questions went like this. I was to ask, what do you want from me? And how fear answered was, I simply want you to acknowledge me, to know that I serve a purpose in your life, which was interesting. The next question was, what can I do for you? And fear answered me and said, love and accept me. And then the next question was, what gift can you give me? And the answer was freedom. So before I go on, I want to talk about these things because the very last thing I ever wanted to do was to accept fear, because I saw fear as a shameful thing. I saw fear as this dark shadow part of me, this thing that I really didn't want anybody to know how much fear I was in, whether it was, speaking, having my own voice or just being afraid of the world in general. I kept that part of me hidden. And so for it to say, love and accept me was just like, and that you serve a purpose in my life. But what really got me was when it said, what gift can you give me? And the gift that fear could give me was freedom. So the next question was, what else would you like to say to me? And I wrote this down. It said, I am not a negative thing. I am a reminder for you when you are not consciously connected to Source. I desire only good for you. I support you in being all that you were created to be. I bless you to fly away as a butterfly, and I will always be here to remind you when you are not looking to Source. And, I started to get it. I started to understand it, that fear really was my GPS. Fear was really that something that was just there to remind me that, whoa, what are you looking at here? What are you trusting? And to come back to center. And so the very thing that I thought was there to trip me up and I wanted to keep hidden was the very thing that ultimately, because I could work with it differently, now today is something that I can know, oh, wow, okay, that's God's voice, or however you want to say that, just saying, hey, come back. You have nothing to be afraid of, come back. Or, if I have fear going into something, it's okay, because you have courage. You can move in and through that. And it was funny because the rest of what it said to me, as I got to tell you, because I lived in fear for a lot of years, growing up, and it was just the nature of like my dad. My dad was overprotective, and so it was like somebody's going to break in the house, or so it was always they're going to get kidnapped, and so it was always these things that so I had all this fear. So fear said to me, by the way, I'm so happy that I'm not dominant in your life. It was a lot of work. And I love that. And I realized the reason it was kind of white with a little bit of gray was because I had really worked through so much of my fear. And but I loved that. I loved that. So anyway, this is the opportunity that we have over these next weeks is to start looking at what is coming up for me that I feel like I have been hiding, either from myself or maybe that I've been hiding from other people. One of the things that Lori talks about in her book is depression. And, she said, depression to her was always this negative thing, this heavy thing. And then as she came to looking at it differently, she realized that depression was simply a tool in her spiritual toolbox of her journey. And I love that because depression gets a bad rap in our new thought circles, and yet people deal with depression a lot. And instead of saying, hey, there's no such thing as depression, just affirm your way out of it, it's like embracing, hey, this is the experience that I'm having, and I can use this for something more. Or, from a personal level, I remember at one point realizing, this was one of my little darknesses, not really a darkness, but I realized one day that I interrupt a lot. And it just like all of a sudden it just came to me, and then I started noticing that I was interrupting. And instead of making it bad, I realized, and I hadn't used this language before, but that I could just turn the volume down. So here's what I want to tell you, because there's that polarity, is that, maybe that, okay, I'm going to tell you this. Okay, so anyway, I just had a whole conversation with myself right in front of you guys. Did you get all that? Because I did. You followed me, didn't you, John? The other side of that is, and this is going to sound kind of funny, but is that I do have a lot to share. And I can feel good about what I have to share. And at the same time, it's good for me to stop and to listen and to be a good listener. And it's taught me a lot about listening. And I will say I'm a good listener. I will be very present with you if you're talking to me, and I will listen to what you have to say. So it's looking at these things and being able to be real with ourselves. I know one of the things it talked about in the book was it's not enough to say, I'm a controller, and just leave it at that. It's important to say, I am a controller, and, this opposite side of it, I could turn the volume down a little bit on that, and, but I have a lot of good ideas on how things can move, that makes sense. So it's just looking at these things and no longer acting like they aren't there, and that somehow it's just the way I am. I hear people say that. It's just the way I am. It's just the way I am. Can't do anything about it. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. And you're the only one who can do something about it. And then the other thing is that the thought just totally went out of my mind what the other thing was. So do you guys know what that thought was? I think it's up on the screen, and that's why I can't find it, because the screen's not here. That's it. I love the parable where Jesus talks about then in the night, men go into this field and they plant tares, and tares are weeds. And the next morning, the servants go out there. They see all the tares that are planted. They go to the owner and they say, what are we going to do? Because people in the night, they came and they planted these tares. And the owner just said, just let them grow together. And when they're all grown, we will harvest them, and we will separate the wheat from the tares, and we will use the wheat for what we use it for, and we will use the tares for fire, for fuel. And so it's that reminder again that, to embrace our totality, to embrace all of it. And it's not about having to try to pick those things out, but rather just to allow them to come up and to know that there's good there, that there's a really good something in that thing that you would call a negative thing in your personality. There's a good thing in there. And you can just ask yourself, do I need to turn the volume up a little? Or do I need to turn the volume down a little? Because I really sincerely believe that we all want to be the best expressions that we have come here to be, yes? And I'm assuming that we all know we're not done yet. If we're sitting here in the physical realm, we're not done yet, right? It's a lifelong journey, but it's a great journey. And so you can still join a group if you would like today. If you don't want to join a group, you can either get the book here or you can get it on Amazon. But I'm excited because I think that sitting here today, 6 weeks from now, we're going to be different, because we are going to be so much more whole and accepting and loving of ourselves. And so I want you to turn and say to somebody, you are perfect. You're amazing. You're wonderful. I am perfect. Yes, and so it is. And namaste, namaste.